music, anime, they happen every year, independently as well as together. What a concept. Today, we're gonna have a nice, casual look back at the shows that I think were able to use music exceptionally as part of their identity. My 5 favorites from 2017. With a few asterisks attached. First things first, this is just my own personal list, as I am just one man and I couldn't watch absolutely everything this year. But more importantly, there won't be any films on this list, mostly because, well, I didn't get to see that many. Only other main thing is that I won't be including sequels for anime that didn't start in 2017. Unless of course there's a case where you don't need to have seen something to understand a new entry. This way, for your sakes, everything mentioned in this video can be checked out right away. I've put links to legal streams in the description, so that you could watch once you're done here. But before we get started, here's a quick reel of great musical moments from shows that aren't on the list.
Well, hello, Fang Hunter! Got the rest of it! This one!
Number 5 is The Ancient Magus Bride. This title has been the anime soundtrack debut of Junichi Matsumoto, and a pretty impressive one at that. Between evoking the European setting and establishing the presence of magic, what ties everything together are these sustained and languid string passages. It might sound plain here in isolation, but each cue is actually very well timed in the scenes themselves, due to some nice, precise editing. But maybe a little too precise sometimes. Very often in this show, music gets cut off completely abruptly. Like, I don't know which staff member had the final say on this, but after a while, things really started getting finicky, whether it was for comedic or dramatic effect. Magus Bride is constantly trying to give the impression that this fantasy world is just around the corner from our own, that there might actually be fairies and dragons wandering around, hidden from plain sight. But what everyone remembers this show by is no doubt its fantastic main theme. Without spoiling too much outright, the moments when this melody returned were very appropriate to the main conceit of the story. The focus isn't just the whimsy and wonder of the world itself, it's also about Chise becoming a part of it, being able to accept this new life after moving on from her old one. Even with the comedic asides or moments of bloody brutality, this is what gives the music its sense of solemnness.
Chise, 世界を愛するんだ。君のいる世界は君の味方じゃなかったかもしれない。でも敵ではない。君の鍵はもう銀の錠に差し込まれている。あとは開けるだけさ。
Now, I don't want to say too much more, because this series is technically still airing, and I may end up revisiting this music in another video once it's over. But let me know your thoughts, even about the music editing. Preferably on Twitter, since I'm not always the biggest fan of YouTube comments. Number 4 is Princess Principal, a return to the world of Yuki Kajura. After another pretty underwhelming outing for the Sword Art Online film, it was hard to really set expectations for a project with her name attached. However, Princess Principal kicks things off with a pretty bold stylistic statement. What began as a chilling cold open up on a rooftop in a fictional steampunk version of England transitions seamlessly into an escalating chase sequence. We're welcomed with some familiar Calafina-style vocal chanting, but before we know it, it moves into this fast-paced, saxophone-driven jazz. And it's at this point that you'll start hearing Kajura's musical tropes in a brand new light, a perfect fit for the dark, glamorous, and unforgiving world of spies. As far as the presence of jazz in this soundtrack goes, there is an implication that Ryo Takahashi had a hand in influencing how this music turned out. Again, to what extent I can't really tell, but I don't think his presence can be ignored, especially after giving us such amazing ED and OP songs.
I will never be deceived. I'm a girl that sees through lies. 'Cause I know it all. Gotta fly so high.
Putting that aside, I think Kajura's music was a great fit for the setting, as her sound has always had a European or gothic twist to some extent. Like, sure, if you dipped into a random scene of a random episode, you'd probably come across some overlap with her usual recipe: brooding cello solos, cold, shimmery piano lines, and percussion that invokes a great deal of suspense. But I've been a fan of Kajura's music for a long time, so it was really cool to hear something familiar, yet adventurous. And if you're interested in Ryo Takahashi's music, then check out his work on Aka, which would have contended for this list if the show itself could keep me awake long enough. So now it's number 3, which technically began years ago, but finally got its fresh start on TV. From its success at the animator Mirai project, to its crowdfunding campaign, to being held hostage by Netflix's weird release system for 6 months. Yeah, it's Little Witch Academia. A highlight in many of Michiru Oshima's soundtracks is the motivic development. Hearing melodic ideas grow, transform, and adjust over the course of the run. However, the 2 short films that aired prior were essentially day-in-the-life of episodes, and there was only so much development we could get in so little time. Now, with this TV show, the possibilities were so much more exciting. Just looking at the main theme itself, hearing it sneak its way into so many kinds of different tempos, instrumentations, and moods really made it feel like it was taking you on a journey. It doesn't always obligate itself to match the often hyperactive or even crude visuals that Studio Trigger is known for, instead crafting its own distinct sense of character that can be very triumphant and even graceful at times. However, one thing that sadly didn't carry over from the short films was the recording quality. These shorts had their music recorded by the Russian State Symphony in Moscow. Oshima's connections with international ensembles has meant that her music has been recorded in all kinds of studios, and often the spaciousness of ones like Mosfilm in Russia gave her symphonic sound a real richness that others may not compare to. Meanwhile, the TV show's music seems to have been recorded in Boston, Paris, and Tokyo. It still sounds great, but when comparing the two, there's a certain, no pun intended, magic that doesn't feel as prominent in the latter. However, with the addition of various drums to add a bit of exoticism, a bunch of memorable character themes, and some prominent techno elements in the second half, it really felt like this was Little Witch Academia for real. It was a payoff that wouldn't have been possible without the efforts of Oshima and the rest of the music staff abroad. And before anyone asks, yes, it was better than Kill la Kill in basically every way. Number 2 is Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. This is a show fans have been adoring for virtually every reason. Disarming comedy, fun characters, and animation that can go from subtle to extreme with no difficulty at all. The best part is that you probably wouldn't expect any of this from the first cue in episode 1.
おかしい。夢から覚めない。夢じゃない？いやいや。
The soundtrack was composed primarily by Masumi Ito, who many may recognize from last year's Flip Flappers, composing the addictive ending song, as well as the actual soundtrack as part of the group Thomas, alongside Mitsugu Ichikawa. And for Dragon Maid, Ichikawa came back to play bass in the ensemble, as well as for a bit of arranging work. But it doesn't stop there, as Ito was collaborating with many musicians she's familiar with in order to bring the series to life. Much of the whimsy comes from the various keyboard instruments used throughout. Not just piano, but melodica, harpsichord, pitched mallet percussion, accordion, and a lot of toy piano. No surprise, as the ensemble features members from another group Ito is a part of called... Toy? Twa? Somebody please correct me on that. But for instance, one of these members, Kotringo, was also responsible for arranging and composing select tracks. The way she layers and weaves instruments together is distinctly frugal, and it's something I've talked about in my video on In This Corner of the World's soundtrack. But then there's other composers like Shin Kawamoto, who seems to have been brought on to add a bit of bombast to the series, some of which includes the race sequence at the sports festival, as well as helping arrange the tracks surrounding the final battle. This show is about the magic of everyday life, and thankfully, all the music manages to stay meaningful, as Kobayashi and her family explore the shared lifestyle they've created for themselves. It was something made possible with the help from this collective of talented musicians, whose work you can trace from Flip Flappers to this to Alice in Zoroku. And hopefully, it won't be too long till we hear from them again. So that just leaves us with one more. Remember, we aren't necessarily looking for one that sounds good on a playlist, but one that creates the context of the series itself. What could it be? What else could it be?
二度と戻れない旅。二度と手に入らない宝物。二度と帰らない命。
There may be a bit of bias putting a fellow Australian's work at the top, but by the time we got to the opening credits of episode 1, I think a lot of us were convinced that Maiden Abyss was not going to be playing it safe. The composer, Kevin Penkin, brought us a mesmerizing electro-acoustic soundtrack for one of the most interesting adventure shows that I've had the pleasure of seeing in a while, because Maiden Abyss's adventure isn't just a journey out into the unknown, it's also a return home. In an interview with my friend The Canapa Effect, Kevin described how he wrote for a small ensemble in a large recording venue to emulate the two lone characters navigating a seemingly endless expanse. The Synchron soundstage in Vienna was used with a chamber ensemble of 19 performers, which allowed for a greater specificity of instrumental sound, as well as how to pair them with synth sounds and other samples. Other than the unique acoustic of the space, the main draw of the Abyss is the alien nature of its flora and fauna. And it was that dense integration of electronic and acoustic sources which reflected such a world, with a soundscape that didn't feel the least bit jarring, but more so naturally disarming. Even in the less tense moments, we're always getting exposed to interesting kinds of sounds that help flesh out this bizarre landscape every step of the way. However, there's a distinct reason why I put Maiden Abyss at the top of this list. Without getting into spoilers, there's a lot of talk about the various curses associated with the Abyss, whether they be benign or life-threatening. But in the end, the most effective curse of all is the very existence of such a place. Despite being beyond the realms of technology or the chances of survival, people still abandon safety for the sake of witnessing the unknown. No matter what the mood of a given scene is, or even the contents of the track itself, what the music underscores is always this feeling of compulsion that defies fear and surface curiosity.
いろんな人がここから戻らない旅に行くのを送ってきました。僕、今日が一番悲しいです。
Music for film and TV has frequently been criticized for manipulating people, giving them impressions that quote-unquote don't matter to the overall narrative. The best thing about Maiden Abyss's music is its ability to manipulate and draw both its characters and viewers in, despite the events that await them. Thanks to top-notch composition from Kevin and direction from the rest of the staff, it's almost impossible to imagine the show working without this narrative force. And while I'm certain the second season will be equally as impressive once it comes around, for now, Maiden Abyss has definitely cemented itself as the best anime soundtrack of 2017. So that's it for the video, and that's it for the year. So the only thing left to say is, well, thank you. We've taken some pretty big steps regarding how we handle our content this past year, but none of it would have been able to work if it wasn't for the support from all you guys, which we are incredibly grateful for. Again, I didn't see every show this year, so let me know if I missed out on any good anime scores down below. We look forward to seeing you in 2018, but I hope you've had a good time so far. Here at the Cartoon Cypher, we're all about
having a good time, having a good time. A shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger.